Hello everybody and welcome back to this tutorial, or if you want, to our second tutorial of our base or digest authentication brute forcer. So what we did for now on is we only specified a few different arguments that we're going to parse to this actual program in order to separate a few different things that we will need in order to run this. So right now, the next thing we want to do after specifying the arguments is try to open the file that the user has specified as a password list or as a dictionary. So we can do that with simply try and except rule. So what we are going to try is, as usual, try to open that file. So f equals open, we can call it just like that. What we are opening is this variable right here, since you remember the actual argument containing the name or the path to the file is set to be in this variable right here. So we are opening that path, dictionary. We are opening it, of course, for the reading, since we want to read from it. And then what we are going to do is we'll just set the passwords to be equal to f.readlines, which is a function that we can use to read lines from this file. In other case, we'll just print the error, so you can just print it like this. File doesn't exist. And you can just type, please check the path. Or please check if the path is correct. You can just print something like that, doesn't even matter. What matters is that we actually close the program right after this, since there is no point in continuing, since that actual program that actual file doesn't exist. The next thing we want to actually do is make a function which we'll call launcher threads, and which we will actually call after this. So we want to call it right here, launcher underscore threads. And what that function will take as an input are all 5 arguments from our actual program. So what it will take passwords. Now make sure that you not actually specify the dictionary, as we already took care of that part right here. We basically opened it and we read lines, stored it in passwords variable or list, however you want to call it, and then we are going to parse passwords to our function, no longer dictionary. So the next thing we want to parse to this is the threads. We can parse the method, or let's go with the user first, then the URL, and then the method. So basically we are parsing our 5 arguments. All we are left to do right now is to actually code the function itself. So let us code it right here, def launcher underscore threads. It needs to take the same input, so passwords, th for threads, username for username, URL, and method. These are 4 arguments that this function will take. Now what this function will do is it will actually manage the threads for our program. So we will need to create a list that is going to kind of take a track of these actual threads, whether if, for example, the number of threads is smaller than the threads we specified, we will need to run a different thread. If it is not, we will have to close threads, and so on and so on. Now, how we are going to specify this? Well, first of all, we're going to create a global variable, I, which we are going to use not only in this function, but also in other functions as well. The reason for that is because it is a global variable, we will need it, so let us just type here global I. And this I is not really a variable, it's going to be a list rather. So right here, and this list will actually have our threads. So in order to start off, let us append I.append 0, and you will see just in a second why. And what we want to do next is, while the length of our passwords, which is the passwords that we specified or that we got from our dictionary, while it exists, so while we are not hitting the end of the file, if hit equals to 1, and before you say right now, well, what is hit? Well, hit is a variable that we are going to code at the beginning of our program, and we will set its value right at the beginning, so we can go just up here. We will call it global hit, and we will set it to be equal to 1. Now, what this variable basically does is, if you code it right here, if hit equals to 1, that means that we need to actually continue running our program. And then if we find a password for our actual website or basic authentication, however you want to call it, we will set this hit variable to be equal to 0, and therefore this part of program, which is a while true loop, or pardon me, not while true, while length loop, is going to stop executing. Then that's what we want, because this is the part of our program that's actually running the threads. This is basically some kind of a flag for this actual function right here. What we're going to try right here is if I, and then the first element of our list, is smaller than th, and you can see that we appended to our actual I the 0, so the first element will be 0. So if the first element is smaller than th, we want to create the password variable to be equal to passwords.pop, pop 0. Let me just show you what I'm doing right here. And then our I, the first element, will be equal the current first element, which is in our case at the first iteration 0. Let me just find where 0 is. Okay, so here it is. And then we will just add 1, which means that we're going to start one thread right now. So we want to add the number 1 to the actual list in order to keep the track of these threads right here. So, and then we create the thread, as I said, so thread equals request underscore performer, which is a function that we will call in just a second. This is basically a function that will brute force the basic authentication. So this is actually the main function itself. We will code it in the next video. For now on, let us just call the thread itself. This function will take an input from the password, username, URL, and method. Now make sure to call it the same as you called it right here when you actually parsed those different arguments right here. And all we want to do is start that thread. What this will do is it will start the thread, and it will, now this list right here will contain 1, which will mean one thread is started, and then it will continue just going through this loop while there is still passwords remaining in this current list. We will just accept this, so if we keyboard interrupt it, since there is really no other way that we can actually interrupt this instead, and that it actually closes well, we will just print interrupted and we will close the actual program. So simple as that, interrupted, and we will sys.exit the program. Make sure that after this, once you actually finish this part right here, you want to join the thread. So thread.join, open and close brackets, and that would be actually everything for this function right here. This is how we are going to manage the threads. Now, once again, let me just remind you that this hit variable is just a flag that we are going to set in our request performer function that we're going to code in the next video to be equal to 0. Once we actually hit the password or find the password, however you want to say it, then this function right here, launcher threads, can actually stop executing. So that will be about it for this tutorial. We will code this function in the next tutorial, and I hope I see you there. Bye.